Tonight on KQED Newsroom, we talk about the recall with the only living governor to have been recalled, Governor Gray Davis. Plus, KQED's political breakdown team shares the latest insight and analysis, and a look at California's other top stories this week. Coming to you from KQED's headquarters in San Francisco, this Friday, September 10th, 2021. Hello and welcome back to KQED Newsroom. I'm your host, Priya David Clemens. Tonight, we'll spend most of our time together discussing Governor Gavin Newsom's recall election as the candidates are in their final days of campaigning. But that's not all that's happening here in the Golden State, so let's take a look at the news. In our Friday 5, this week's top 5 stories in California. California battled through another week of wildfires. The Dixie Fire is still burning after almost 2 months, and it's approaching 1 million acres in size, forcing new evacuations this week. It's about 59% contained. The Calder Fire is still burning near Lake Tahoe, but many residents who were evacuated earlier have now been allowed to return home. It's about 53% contained. The Los Angeles Unified School District has passed a COVID-19 vaccine requirement for students 12 and older who want to attend class in person. LA is the first major school district in the nation to do this, and it comes right as President Joe Biden rolled out vaccine mandates for all federal employees, large companies, and many healthcare workers. On Thursday, Vice President Kamala Harris swung through her native Bay Area to stand by Governor Newsom in his fight against the recall effort. She warned the crowd gathered in San Leandro of the national stakes of this election.
They think if they can win in California, they can do this anywhere. Well, we will show them you're not going to get this done. Not here, never.
The high-profile trial of Elizabeth Holmes, who founded the biotech company Theranos, began in San Jose this week. Holmes stands accused of tricking investors into supporting a new blood testing technology that turned out to be a sham, among other crimes. At one point, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. And this weekend marks the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks of September 11th. Across the state, fire and police departments are planning events to commemorate the thousands of people who lost their lives when extremists hijacked 4 airplanes and used them to carry out suicide attacks. And that's this week's Friday 5. I'll be joined later by KQED's political breakdown team. But first, a deep dive interview with someone who knows a lot about recall politics. When it comes to the recall election, there's only one other Californian who really knows what Gavin Newsom is going through right now: Gray Davis. In 2003, Governor Gray Davis went through the same ringer. The circumstances were different. He had to contend with a budget deficit, an energy crisis, and an action hero movie star challenger. Today, Governor Newsom is facing his challenges too, from the pandemic to wildfires. But there are far more Democratic voters in the state now, and our budget has billions of dollars in surplus. So will Newsom beat this recall? Joining us now with his take is Governor Gray Davis. Governor Davis, welcome, and thank you for joining us on the show.
My pleasure, Priya. Good to be with you.
Well, 18 years ago, you were the one in the hot seat, so I could imagine you're having some pretty intense flashbacks these days.
Trust me, it's no fun. To put it in reporter terms, it'd be like your editor saying, Priya, we want you to do a story on the recall, we want you to do a story on the weather. But by the way, while you're doing that, we're going to interview 3 other people, and if we like one of them, they're going to replace you. So you have to basically do your day job and also make the case why you should be allowed to continue the work that the people elected you to perform.
Well, with the wisdom that comes from your experience, could you share your perspective on this recall election?
Yes, and I'm happy to say that for some time now, I've been saying that Gavin Newsom is going to win. He's done a very good job in the pandemic, better than any other big state. About 46 million people have shots in their arms, 80% of the population. By the way, his major opponent, Larry Elder, said the first thing he'll do in day 1 is to eliminate the vaccine mandate and eliminate the mask mandate. That's like raising the white flag of surrender and capitulating to the virus. That would be a disaster. So that's one big difference. He also has $80 billion in surplus, as you mentioned, which allows him to spend money to help renters pay their past rent and to help small businesses revive and bring back their employees. And most importantly, or significantly different, there's a whole bunch of Democratic political heavyweights that have come in on his behalf, from Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, President Obama, and Bernie Sanders have done commercials very effective. Kamala Harris was there a couple days ago in the Bay Area, and President Biden is coming, looks like, on Monday. So much better chance that he will win. The big difference is that there's 5 million more Democrats today than there was when I was elected. I followed 16 consecutive years of Republican governors. The Republicans and Democrats were kind of evenly divided. Now the Republicans they're the third party. They have about 26% of the electorate. The Democrats have about 46%, and the Independents have some 22 or 3%. So totally different situation. He should win. My judgment, he will win. But recalls are funny things, and this is not the time to take the pedal off the metal. You just have to run as hard as you can between now and next Tuesday.
You struck a bipartisan tone as you were leaving office. I want to listen to a clip from a press conference you held with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
This life is like a relay race, and we each run our part of the race as well as we can, and then we pass the baton to the next person, which is what I'm doing in this transition.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you, Governor.
Governor-elect,
Thank you.
So as you look back, what do you think? Was Governor Schwarzenegger a good governor for California?
I think he did some good things. I like to think we did some good things. We both were concerned about the environment. I was proud to sign the first bill in America reducing greenhouse gases, focused on tailpipe emissions, and President Obama used that as a national model. He was totally for that. He made improvements on that with cap and trade. We were both concerned about public safety, both concerned about a good economy. So we had lots of areas of overlap. He had a big recession, even bigger than mine. So he had his challenges, but he definitely made some contributions in the area of the environment and public safety.
Governor Davis, you earned a Bronze Star for your military service in Vietnam, and now many are drawing analogies between America's war in Vietnam and the one in Afghanistan. What do you think about how President Biden ended the war in Afghanistan last month?
Well, Priya, first let me say I'm very proud of every man and woman who has served this nation in whatever capacity over the last several decades. And I'm particularly proud of the people who served in Afghanistan. They should come home feeling they did their job. Bin Laden was killed and deserved to be. There had been no subsequent attack from Afghanistan, so they completed the mission. And I'm totally against people moaning and groaning about not being able to get everyone out of Afghanistan. I mean, you'll recall Vietnam, we had 640,000 people there compared to like 6,000 in Afghanistan, and still at the very end, there were helicopters taking people off the top of the embassy. This evacuation was a miracle. Over 120,000 people still going on through commercial flights landing in Doha. I believe Biden has and will continue to keep his word. Every American who wants to leave that country will, in fact, leave that country and come home to their family.
Give us your take on the state of California right now and the challenges that we face.
Well, a lot of the challenges, Priya, come from the pandemic because the governor rightly relied on data and public health advice to keep people alive. And as I may have said earlier, about a week ago, we had 24,000 people infected in the last week. Texas had like 43,000 and Florida 63,000. Those are the top three states in terms of population in that order. So even though we're bigger, we have less people infected. It means less people going to hospitals and less people dying. That's a good thing. But in doing that, he had to restrict people's behavior, saying if you're a restaurant owner, you can only allow people to pick up takeout. All those people who can't work, and even the owner, is ticked off because they can't make the living they want to make for their family. I totally get that. The good news is it's $80 billion that showed up in the state's coffers. A lot of that is being spent, at least $10 billion, to help small businesses revive, and at least $10 billion to help renters pay all their past rent. So the bad news is the governor has to deal with the pandemic, high unemployment, and other issues. The good news is he has the money to make amends with the people who were adversely affected by the pandemic.
With the wildfires, climate change is top of mind. While you were in office, you worked towards mitigating climate change. Where do you think California stands now?
This governor has done more than any governor in modern history to better equip and better prepare for wildfires. The wildfires are getting the best of us. Gavin Newsom has done a whole lot of good things, but we need more equipment, more cameras, better forest preparation, better clearance of brush and the fuel that's used for wildfires. And whatever we're doing, we have to ramp it up like 500 or 1,000%, because these wildfires are getting bigger. They're scared the hell out of people. So there's no one more empathetic to people who've been in a fire than me, having experienced it to some extent when I was governor, and see it get a lot worse through no fault of the governor, largely climate change over the last couple of years.
Governor Davis, I want to thank you for your time so much today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Priya.
There are only a few days left before voting concludes on the question of whether Governor Gavin Newsom should stay or go. It's been a long process that's involved grassroots campaigning, legislators, election officials, and millions of dollars. Reporter Monica Lam traces the history of the recall.
More than 100 years ago, Californians gave themselves the right to recall a governor if they weren't happy with how things were going. Since then, people have tried to oust California's top dog 55 times. In fact, every single California governor since 1960 has faced a recall attempt. But it was only in 2003 when an attempt actually made it successfully onto the ballot. That's when Democratic Governor Gray Davis lost his job and Republican Arnold Schwarzenegger took over. It was a first for California, and only the second time it had happened in the United States. For you history buffs out there, the first successful recall was of North Dakota's governor in 1921. Back to the here and now. The campaign to unseat Governor Gavin Newsom was spearheaded by retired Yolo County Sheriff Sergeant Orrin Heatley, who leads the California Patriot Coalition. Heatley's campaign didn't get much attention until November 2020, when in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, Newsom attended a dinner party at the upscale French Laundry restaurant in violation of his own public health orders. When this information went public, nearly 500,000 people rushed to sign on to Heatley's efforts. To qualify for the ballot, a recall campaign needs the backing of 12% of the people who voted in the last gubernatorial election. Heatley's efforts were gathering steam, but he needed more time to gather enough signatures. Citing COVID-19 lockdowns as the reason, he asked for an extension and got it from Judge James Arguelles, who'd been nominated to the bench just months earlier by President Donald Trump. Arguelles gave the Recall Gavin campaign 4 extra months to gather signatures, noting that he had granted similar extensions to 2 initiatives backed by Democrats earlier in the year. In April 2021, the Recall campaign showed they had the support of 14% of past voters when they submitted 1.7 million valid signatures. At that point, there's typically a budgeting and legislative process that takes months before an election date gets set. Most pundits expected the date to be in November, when voters are, well, used to voting. But public approval of Governor Newsom's handling of the pandemic had started to rise, and Democrats wanted to ride that momentum. Democratic State Senator Steve Glazer put it this way in a tweet about the governor. He has rebounded well with vaccines and budget. His biggest threats are the unknowns: virus variant, fires, school reopening. No reason to delay and give opposition any more running room. So Democrats sped up the timeline. Legislators zoomed through the budget process and changed the law to waive the usual 30-day review period. Republican leaders called the governor a cheater, but their hands were tied. The date was set for September 14th. There's been no shortage of Republican candidates vying to replace Newsom. There's conservative talk show host Larry Elder, the former mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer, Assemblymember Kevin Kiley, who wrote a book advocating for this recall, businessperson John Cox, who's been campaigning with a live bear. He ran for governor in 2018, but lost. Former Olympian, reality TV star, and transgender rights activist Caitlyn Jenner. And Democrat Kevin Paffrath, a 29-year-old YouTube influencer. Campaign money has been pouring in. Recall supporters have raised about $14 million to date. Newsom's team has a nearly 5 times advantage. They've raised over $70 million. Most of that money, almost 90%, was contributed from inside California along typical lines. Real estate developers and restaurant owners want to unseat Newsom, while labor unions and the California Teachers Association are lining up to support the governor. There are 2 questions on the ballot. The first is, should the governor be recalled from office? The second is, if the governor is removed, who should take his place? If more than 50% of voters say yes to recalling Newsom in the first question, then whichever challenger receives the most votes in question number 2 becomes the new governor. No matter who wins, voters will soon have to weigh in again on who should lead California, because the next election is right around the corner in 2022. For KQED Newsroom, I'm Monica Lam.
What Monica said is so true. Once this race is over and the votes are counted, the next race for governor will start up almost right away. In fact, some of the current challengers may just be warming up. Joining us now are KQED's Politics and Government team, Senior Editor Scott Shafer and correspondent Marisa Lagos. Thank you both for coming on back. It's
so
been a minute.
Excited.
Yeah,
good to see
truly
you.
good to be here in person.
Great to see you both. All right, so let's talk about the race. Scott, there have been a couple of polls that came out recently. They seem to reveal that Governor Newsom is pulling ahead.
Yeah, what's happening is 2 polls roughly showing the same thing, and that is that among likely voters, and that's important, support for the recall is about 38%, opposition 59-60%. So that's good for Gavin Newsom. Do the math. Very few people are undecided. And so at this point, it's really about mobilizing each side, getting your voters out. But if you look at the underneath the top line, Newsom's doing very well among all groups other than Republicans. And he has clearly, the enthusiasm gap with Democratic voters has been closed. It was thought a few weeks ago that Republicans were much more animated and excited to be voting, and that made the likely voter pool look a little more conservative, more trouble for Newsom, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Democrats are definitely excited.
So is this sort of putting a little spring in his step? Marisa, you were out on the trail with him this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think also putting a spring in his step, the Vice President of the United States showing up to, campaign for him. I mean, certainly, I think early August, there was a lot of freaking out, to use a scientific term, among Democrats in this state. I think that they have really shown that a lot of the concerns, especially that advocates had about them not having a ground game, have sort of been answered. And then, yeah, he's out there, he's making waves. President Biden will be in town on Monday with him. So I think that there's this real sense of coalescing by the Democratic Party. And, that any weakness that sort of folks were smelling a couple months ago isn't there. I mean, he is using sort of turning the COVID argument on its head. I think Republicans had hoped to use both the Delta variant and just the original lockdowns against the governor, and he's digging in on that message and saying, look, I made the right call, and people like Kamala Harris are backing that up.
And so if he wins here, then nationally that could be a message that goes out.
I think so. I mean, I think that he and Democrats we saw what the president said this week about, sort of laying down the law around vaccines. I think Democrats are really feeling emboldened that the sort of silent majority is with them, and that this is not an issue where they want to kind of show weakness, that they want to back down on, because at the end of the day, it's not good for anyone running in 22 or beyond if this pandemic is not under control.
Right. And Scott, Governor Newsom has been making a strong pitch to Latinos. I want to take a listen to a clip from what he said this week on the trail.
No community will be more disproportionately impacted from a public health prism than the Latino community. And the power he has day one with an executive order to eliminate those protections is profound. And I hope the community wakes up to that simple choice, because that's a choice you'll make.
So can you tell us more about who he's reaching out to and why? What's his strategy?
Well, Latinos are now about 27% of the electorate, and so it's really important. And they tend to be Democrats by and large, and so the issue is, will they vote? And so what you saw him just there speaking right here in the neighborhood was a phone bank. There were people calling Spanish-speaking voters and encouraging them to vote. And so, the message really is, look, as he said, Latinos and African Americans have disproportionately been affected by COVID already in terms of unemployment, health, vaccine access, all those things. And when you have a governor who has helped the state turn the corner, The alternative is Larry Elder, this very conservative talk show host who's promising to remove mandates the very first day he's in office. And so I think Latinos are listening to that message, as well as the message that came a little bit earlier in the campaign, which is who's behind this recall. It really had nothing to do with COVID. It was all about immigration, crime, and sort of talking about people who are here illegally, the death penalty. And so I think, and very close to Trump and Trump supporters. And so those two messages, like, don't go backwards with COVID. Let's don't like lose the progress we've made. I think that those issues are resonating with Latinos, and we're seeing that in the polls you mentioned earlier. About 2-to-1 Latinos are opposing the recall.
Okay, and I do want to dig into some of these challengers to Newsom, because we're seeing people that we haven't known before as well, with the exception perhaps of Larry Elder, who is, as Scott just mentioned, a talk show host, conservative talk show host, calls himself the sage of South Central, right? Marisa, we do have a clip here from one of his campaign ads, so let's roll that and then we'll come back and talk about Larry Elder.
Recalling Gavin Newsom is personal to me. I benefited from schools, the quality of which allowed me to go from South Central to the Ivy League. That route is now foreclosed because the quality of the schools has declined. I favor school choice, he doesn't. I favor giving parents an option out, he doesn't. I'm Larry Elder, and this is a fight for the soul of California.
So Larry Elder, obviously very well spoken, and he's the front runner. He's leading the pack by a large margin. Can you tell us a little bit more about him, and perhaps if there's anything specific to the school choice issue that comes up over and over again?
Right, which I find funny because Newsom essentially won that argument against a Democrat in the 2018 primaries, right? I mean, Antonio Villaraigosa ran against Newsom saying he's too much in the pockets of teachers unions. We need school choice, more charter schools, more options. But I think Larry Elder, as you pointed out, is a talk show host. He has made a name over 2.5 decades of saying, sort of outrageous things. I think that's what a lot of his base likes about him. I think there are a lot of similarities to Trump in sort of the way he speaks, the things he talks about, the way he is, I think, excited to sort of say things that he knows are unexpected, especially from a black man in this state. And so I think what you're seeing is the same thing someone like John Cox, who's running again but ran in 2018 against Newsom, is that there's an upper limit of that support in a state like California where there are almost twice the number of Democrats than Republicans. And I think the more, he was really a gift to the Newsom campaign because you had this sort of humdrum set of candidates. Nobody was paying that much attention. All the anger was focused on Newsom. You start digging up some of the stuff that Larry Elder has said, $0 minimum wage, the idea that women shouldn't have workplace protections if they have families. That speaks loudly to a lot of people in California who may not love Newsom, but certainly don't think that Elder should be in that governor's chair.
And let's go to one other candidate who's also been making some noise as the runner-up to Larry Elder right now, right? Second in the recall election on the opponent's side.
Surprisingly.
Another name that we had not heard before, really, Kevin Paffrath. So he's the only Democrat that is running, that is of note at this point. And we do have a little clip from him as well, and then we'll come back.
If California had a strong leader who cleaned up the problems in our state and stopped wasting money, we could have no income tax for any income earned under $250,000 and finally make California competitive again.
Lovely smile. Scott, what do you make of Kevin Paffrath and his pitch to voters?
Well, he's the only Democrat really who is saying vote yes on the recall. He wants to get rid of Newsom. He calls himself a JFK-style Democrat, which I'm not sure what that means in 2021. He also said he's like 49% Republican, 51% Democrat. So he's fairly conservative. And if you listen to his rhetoric, it's not that different in some ways from some of the other Republicans running. But he has a huge following on his YouTube channel. He's been giving out advice on real estate and investing for a long time. He hasn't gotten a lot of attention, so he's been tailing the governor and showing up at his events and just doing interviews, kind of a guerrilla campaign sort of. And it's kind of worked for him. I mean, if you want to vote for a Democrat as a sort of plan B, just to make sure there isn't going to be a Republican replacing Newsom if the recall were to pass, Paffrath is the one that people are going to vote for. But I have to say, his performance in the debate, a little out there. You know, he talked about building a pipeline from the Mississippi River, renting land in Texas, going through all these other states.
A lot of big ideas out there.
Big ideas, not a lot of practicality.
We may see them coming back. Marisa, in the last few seconds we have here, can you talk about the national implications for this race?
Absolutely. I mean, if this were going the other direction in these polls, if Newsom looked like he was losing, Democrats would be freaking out. I think it's looking good for them. I think they will take some of these issues we talked about, including COVID-19, and ride those into the 22 midterms. I think the big question is, does he look weak, and does that mean that there's a challenge from the left in next year's 2022 governor's race?
Right. All right, well, Marisa Lagos and Scott Shafer, the two members of the Political Breakdown team, you can talk with them and hear more from them on their podcast. Thank you for being with us today.
Good to be with
Pleasure.
you.
Yeah, great to see you again. If you're a fan of the show, you know that we like to end with a segment we call Something Beautiful. Tonight's piece, in keeping with the recall theme, is a look at the beauty of democracy in action. And that's the end of our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us here on our new set. If you want to get a look behind the scenes, then please hang out with us online too. KQED Newsroom is on Twitter and Facebook. You can reach me on Twitter at Priya D. Clemens or email us at knr@kqed.org. We'll see you right back here next Friday night. By then, we may even know who's governor. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.